So, Trump's gang clearly didn't see this one coming. The Yemeni armed forces have just gone and swatted one of America's prized flying machines right out of the sky like it's no big deal. We're talking about an American MQ-9 drone here. One of those flashy gadgets they send to sniff around and stir up trouble over Yemeni airspace. But the Yemeni air defense? Nah, they weren't having it. Just blasted it out of the sky, cool as you like. And here's the kicker. That drone's worth a mind-boggling $32 million. I mean, that's not exactly pocket change, is it? And get this, it's not even some one-off fluke. At OMT News, we're dedicated to bringing you sharp, no-nonsense analysis on the conflicts shaping Palestine, Yemen, and beyond. In a world where propaganda drowns out truth and narratives are manipulated to fit political agendas, we refuse to take the easy route. We don't do spin. We don't take sides. We dig deep, call out hypocrisy, and break down the complexities others ignore. But independent reporting like this doesn't thrive without your support. If you value balanced, unfiltered discussion, don't let efforts to silence voices like ours win. Like and share this video to push back against the algorithm and IDF internet bots. Subscribe to stay ahead of the conversation. The Yemeni armed forces have been at it, and they've managed to bring down a total of 16 of these beauties in just 1 year. Do the maths, mate. That's a whopping $512 million of America's fancy hardware turned into scrap metal. If that doesn't make the Yanks nervous, I don't know what will. And it's not just the money they're burning through. This is giving the Americans a proper strategic migraine. Every time the Yemeni armed forces knock one of these drones out of the sky, it's like they're torching a pile of cash right in front of Washington's eyes. The MQ-9 Reaper itself costs around $30 million each, and by late 2024, the Yanks had already lost at least 5 of them to Yemeni missiles. That's around $150 million straight down the drain. And that's not even counting the few they lost early in 2025, or any of those CIA-operated ones they'd rather keep quiet about. Just to put things in perspective, the RQ-4 Global Hawk, the bigger, badder, and way more expensive cousin of the MQ-9, goes for over $130 million apiece. Now, the Yemeni armed forces haven't managed to hit any of those, but Iran did smack one out of the sky over the Strait of Hormuz back in June 2019. Just goes to show, even the fanciest gear can be knocked down if you're clever enough. And it's not just the airframe getting trashed. Each Reaper's packed with all sorts of high-tech goodies. Electro-optical cameras, infrared sensors, SAR radars, you name it. Sometimes they're even lugging around munitions. One of them that crashed in 2023 was carrying an Mk-82 bomb, for crying out loud. So all those costs just keep stacking up. And every time the US loses one, they've got to either cough up for a new one or yank drones from other hotspots to make up for it. The Yemeni armed forces have turned this into a really expensive game of how long can you keep up? Now, let's talk about how this is messing with the Americans' military plans. It's a proper nightmare for their whole surveillance operation. The one where they try to keep an eye on everyone and everything. Those MQ-9s are their go-to for watching over terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and keeping tabs on Yemeni armed forces' movements. But every time one of these drones gets blown to bits, it leaves a massive gap in their surveillance until they can scramble another one into position. The Yanks have had to switch up their tactics quite a bit. First off, they've started flying the drones higher, trying to stay out of range of those surface-to-air missiles, SAMs. The MQ-9 can cruise at about 50,000 feet, which sounds high enough, but apparently missiles like the SA-6 can still reach that far. So, not exactly bulletproof, is it? Then there's the whole standoff approach. They're keeping their drones further offshore or at a distance, zooming in with their fancy cameras instead of flying directly over Yemen. But that's like trying to spy on your nosy neighbor through a foggy pair of binoculars. You lose a lot of detail and can't watch stuff for too long. And here's the thing. The US isn't keen on chucking fighter jets into the mix either. They're not in a proper war with the Yemeni armed forces, so sending in fighter escorts to protect the drones is risky business. They don't want to risk their jets getting shot down as well, which almost happened in February 2025. Now this is where it gets interesting. The Americans have started going all preemptive. By late 2023, they were actively hunting down Yemeni SAM launchers if they thought a missile launch was about to happen. Case in point, on 31st January 2024, a US Navy FA-18 from the USS Bush went ahead and blew up a Yemeni SAM site just as it was getting ready to fire. That's a massive shift, right? They're now clashing directly with Yemeni air defenses just to keep their precious drones safe. So here's the thing. Every time the Yemeni armed forces bring down one of these American drones, it's not just about smashing expensive toys. Nah, it's about scooping up whatever bits and pieces they can find, and boy, are they making the most of it. Some of the wreckage ends up in pretty decent shape, which is like striking gold for them. The idea: pick through the parts, figure out what makes them tick, and maybe even use it for a bit of psychological warfare. Let's break it down. Back in late 2023, they shot one down over Sada, and there's footage of rebels collecting all the drone's fancy electronics into little piles. Analysts reckon one of the pieces looks suspiciously like part of an AN-1 MTSB optical sensor turret. That's the top-tier camera system for the MQ-9. And there were flight control modules and other juicy bits just lying around. It's not just about showing off either. They probably hand this stuff over to their engineers, or even Iranian ones, to figure out how the tech works. Even broken parts can spill the beans on things like sensor capabilities, how the encryption works, or even some of the software algorithms. Sure, most of the sensitive data probably self-destructs when the drone crashes, but still, it's not like they leave everything squeaky clean. And speaking of Iran, yeah, the Yemeni armed forces have a pretty cozy relationship with the IRGC. Any interesting American tech they get their hands on is most likely passed over to Iranian experts, whether in Yemen or via some route through Oman or directly to Iran. The Iranians have a bit of a history with this stuff, you know. Back in 2011, they managed to take down a US RQ-170 Sentinel stealth drone, reverse-engineered parts of it, and even knocked up a copy of the thing. So, when they get their hands on an MQ-9, even if it's not exactly cutting edge, they're going to be all over it. They'd be particularly interested in its satellite communication systems, data links, and the anti-jamming modules. And let's not kid ourselves. If Iran gets something good, Russia and China are probably getting a peek as well. They're both tight with Iran, and both of them have their reasons for wanting a closer look at what makes the MQ-9 tick. Russia, for instance, has had a few run-ins with American drones in Syria, and even saw one of their jets clip a US drone over the Black Sea. So, if they get the chance to check out a Reaper's sensor or engine parts, you can bet they're not going to pass it up. Now let's talk about the reverse engineering side of things. The Yemeni armed forces themselves don't have the industrial base to build their own drones from scratch, but they're definitely taking notes. Iran could be the one to try copying some of the parts, and there's even been some chatter about them claiming to have hijacked a Reaper's GPS. That's probably a bit of exaggeration, but you never know. Even if they can't fully control the drones, figuring out what frequencies and protocols are used for control could help them refine their jamming techniques. Plus, if they can grab any stored data, like images or waypoints, that's just more intel for them to chew over. And let's not forget the propaganda angle. The mere fact they've got their hands on American drone wreckage is a PR goldmine. They've been boasting left and right about shooting down 6 Reapers in a row during their Gaza-related campaign in 2024. Obviously, that's most likely an exaggeration, but it doesn't matter. The point is, they're showing off the footage of the wreckage over and over again to make it look like they've pulled off some sort of drone-killing masterclass. And to make it even more dramatic, they label any drone wreckage as an MQ-9 Reaper, just to make it sound more impressive, even if it's probably just from smaller drones. They're milking this thing for every drop of propaganda value they can get. The United Nations panel of experts on Yemen has been keeping an eye on this stuff too. In their reports from 2021 and 2022, they included pictures of US weapon system components the Yemeni armed forces had put on display. They even found parts of a Hellfire missile from a US drone strike that the rebels claimed was one of their own SAMs. Cheeky move, that. And the UN has confirmed there's definitely Iranian tech floating around in Yemen, which pretty much confirms what everyone suspects. Anything foreign the Yemeni armed forces get their hands on is getting studied and possibly replicated by their Iranian buddies. Of course, the US isn't just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. They've been quick to confirm or deny Yemeni claims whenever they pop up. For example, after one shoot-down claim in September 2024, the Pentagon was straight on the mic saying they hadn't lost a drone around that time. That's probably because either the drone was one of those sneaky CIA-operated ones, or they're just trying to keep their tech losses on the down low. On the ground, if a drone goes down somewhere the US can get to, they'll make an effort to retrieve it. And if they can't get to it, they might just blow the wreckage to bits to keep it out of enemy hands. Like that January 2021 incident where a Grey Eagle drone went down and locals reported an explosion at the crash site. Yeah, most likely the Americans torching their own tech. The whole thing's basically turned into a race for the wreckage. And on their turf, the Yemeni armed forces usually win that race. They've been using those wrecks for propaganda, handing them over to Iran's tech whizzes, and who knows what else. One US defense official even admitted it's like serving up intelligence gold on a silver platter to the enemy. Sure, the Reaper isn't exactly state-of-the-art stealth tech. It's been around for ages, and everyone knows the general design. But those software and encryption modules? That's the real prize. And those are at risk whenever one of these birds crashes on Yemeni soil. And if the Yemeni armed forces keep this up, the US is probably going to have to step up their game even more. They might start bringing in stuff like drone jamming units or going all out with those wild weasel missions. You know, the ones where they actively hunt down enemy air defenses. But if they start doing that, they'll have to pull resources from other conflicts. And you can bet the Americans aren't thrilled about having to spread themselves even thinner. Basically, the Yemeni armed forces have turned what used to be a smooth operation for the US into a full-on nightmare. And now, Washington's left scratching their heads trying to figure out how to get a handle on this whole mess.